Welcome to the Gentleman's Guide to Curseborne and part 3 of the final Bout Chronicle I have been running for members of my Patreon. As I've made clear many times now, I run around 9 different games for supporters of my Patreon, different groups, and we currently have 2 Curseborne games on the go with 2 different groups for, well, 1 for each. And final bout, I have done the first 2 recaps on this channel. This is part 3. If you haven't caught up with parts 1 and 2, here's the very high-level summary. Our crew attended a boxing match in Junction City at the Riverside Theatre, where old veteran, who had long been considered washed up and unable to fight, Antonio Bellegarde, successfully knocked out and brain damaged someone by the name of Mazmark, an influencer, very popular with his drink line by the name of Juice. He then staggered off backstage. Our characters realised that the ring appeared to have been possessed by something demonic, it had to say. Ultimately, Jean Tavers, our dead character, was able to commune with and ascertain that it was a demon of sorts by the name of Ixit Lil Shokatil, that feeds off of violence and suffering and panic and is eventually going to grow to the size that it can consume the entirety of Junction City. Our other characters found that Antonio Bellegarde, there were 2 of him. One of him was lurking outside the theatre, seemingly in a brain-dead fashion. He ultimately decomposed into ash after a little bit of jostling. And the other one, the one that fought the fight, likewise decomposed into brick dust, hair, and fat. There was a mystery at play here, and what they established after being given a coin with a curse on it and being told, well, the curse is now being passed on to you, was that Bellegarde, whose spirit they communed with, had entered deal with some kind of sorcerer to gain all this strength to beat this one last opponent, and potentially the cost was his demise. They are now owners of this coin, possibly cursed with it as well, and have been asking around their various contacts and companions to find out what they might know about the situation. At the start of session 3, we began with Jean Tavers, the Hangman, our horror TV host, a former actor and still a public presence. He is well known for his horror get-up, his ghastly ghouls, his Vincent Price-isms, and he and his camera operator Forrester go anywhere where there is esoterica to be found. Now, Forrester had been filming everything that took place at the theatre, and after transferring from one VHS to the other, because Forrester is old school, and also Jean prefers the lines up the screen effect of the VHS quality horror, Forrester discovered something that he showed his friend and boss, Jean, in his recording studio, his dirty flat. After serving him a cream de menthe, filled with frost chipped off from the inside of the freezer, Forrester showed him the transferred VHS. Now, there was a man at the theatre who, through an unfortunate accident, stumbled down some stairs and got his eye impaled on a champagne bottle. He was ocularly impaled, and our outcast medic, Simon McDaniel, of the Keepers of the Broken Vine, was basically close enough and adept enough to save the man's life. On the transfer video, because Forrester recorded this, it is quite visible that there is a tall, humanoid-like shade that is lurking behind the man whose eyeball gets impaled, and when that happens, the silhouette becomes something quite vividly Aztec in nature, almost stereotypically so, exulting in the violence and the panic that follows. Forrester's footage goes further than that, and when he's recording The Ring, everything that Jean witnessed by basically passing through a liminality and communing with Ixit Lil Shokatil has been picked up on this transferred video. Now, Forrester is a cynic and thinks there's all some special effect or a double negative or something like that, but he is absolutely thrilled with this, because this could be enough to put he and Jean, specifically Jean, because he worships the old dead guy, back in the mainstream. This kind of footage is genuine horror footage. It's just a shame that it's such poor quality. So Jean now has video evidence of Ixit Lil Shokatil's manipulations. Meanwhile, Evelyn, our Hungry of the Gaki family met up with her sometime friend, sometime rival Nina Hartshorn at the Gas Bar, or the Vapor Bar, I should say, which looks every bit like a vape store. All neons, white panels, listless-looking staff who'd rather be anywhere other than there. And it was because Evelyn sent her a message offering to spill some tea. There was an amusing exchange of a tea emoji with a question mark, another tea emoji, a tea emoji with an exclamation mark, and then the Vapor Bar. And so Evelyn went out to meet up with Nina, who had had a drink spilled on her, well, frankly expensive designer white gown at the event the night before. Evelyn made I'll call it a half-hearted apology for splashing some red wine over Nina, and Nina only half accepted the apology. But these two have history. This is something that myself and the player have been working on, that our Gaki, Evelyn, and our Sphinx NPC here, or SGC, Nina Hartshorn, were once in the same crew. Now, something happened to that crew that resulted in those two being the only ones left. They agreed that they could no longer work together, but they're not going to share with others what exactly befell the crew to make that happen. And so their relationship now is somewhere between affection, rivalry, blackmail, mutually assured destruction. If one goes down, they're taking the other one with them. It turned out that Nina was quite pleased to see Evelyn, and it seems the same was the case the other way round. Nina was all too happy to introduce her to this vapor drink that is being sold in this store. Basically, you get a chilled cylinder of moisture. You wrap your entire mouth around it, and you let the vapor fill your mouth, and you're forced to basically swallow it as it pools on your tongue and around your teeth. And it comes in all kinds of exquisite flavours. They had a bit of a riposte about the fact that this cinnamon flavour would leave you dry and not moist at all, and there was various accusations one way or the other, but in the end I would say they came away a little closer than they were at the theatre. Evelyn wanted to ask Nina a question about what occurred at the theatre, specifically about this demon, specifically about who might be responsible for it, any sorcerer that might be in charge of it, and Evelyn was pretty giving with the information she provided about this homunculus copy of Antonio Bellegarde, for example. Nina said that she did know something, but there would be a payment in return. No one does anything for free in Curseborne, and she wanted some time alone with Simon McDaniel, the Keeper of the Broken Vine, our medic, our ex-military character. It seems Nina has taken a shine to him, wants to let out some of her wild form frustrations on him for a while. And Evelyn promised to do what she could, seems to have meant it. And in exchange, Nina explained, yes, there is a woman by the name of Grace Prendergast. She is a sorcerer in the city, on the outs with her family, but certainly very skilled at creating these homunculi, these creatures of brick dust, hair, and fat. So maybe she's who Evelyn should be speaking with. Now, it just so happened that Evelyn put two and two together, because having interrogated Antonio Bellegarde's spirit before devouring it, she ascertained that he met up with an old woman who gave him this coin, who gave him this blessing of strength, and commanded him to kill someone in an old sort of curiosity shop, a Goodwill store that says your wishes can come true on the window pane. She had a face like a crescent moon, protruding at the forehead and chin like something out of a fairy tale. Well, Evelyn checked with Nina, and sure enough, this sounds very much like Grace Prendergast. So she was given the address of where to check out Grace, and that is where the two parted. Now, it wasn't all down to supernatural business, because, well, Zayden and Lucian, Zayden now a drummer of the band Celestial Sphere, and Lucian, the sound engineer, were called in with the rest of the band to a meeting with a producer come influencer by the name of Micah, and a record store owner by the name of Ella, who have worked with them in the past, the various contacts on their sheets. Well, there's a fantastic opportunity tonight. The band's been losing money hand over fist because of Spotify, iTunes, Amazon Music, and the like. Now is a time to capture a captive audience. A band was supposed to be playing at the Riverside Theatre where Mazmark's head was bashed in the night before. Well, they're not coming anymore because they're good friends of Mazmark and they feel it would be disrespectful. That means there is a space open. It's time for Celestial Sphere to put on a performance, and not only that, put on a performance in the ring where Mazmark's skull was battered, and sell a lot of merchandise. Hell, if they can get Lucian working overtime, they might be able to produce an album there and then, transfer it onto CDs, physical media, I know, and sell it to people on the way out of the theatre, and they will sell a fucking bomb. Of course, this was made even better by the fact that the player who was playing Zayden had already written a song about the events of the boxing match. So fans of Mazmark, influencer in the millions of subscribers, with his awful juice drink, well, his followers are going to buy a song about him, especially if it's released within a day of his near-fatal injury. He's currently in critical condition in hospital. And so, to business, they started thinking. That wasn't all, because we had a series of solo-ish scenes at the beginning of this session, including Simon McDaniel, the keeper of the Broken Vinyl I mentioned earlier, waking up to a repeated car horn outside, waking up his neighbours who weren't too happy about it, threatening to smash in the 4x4 that was waiting out there. Well, it's Gunnery Sergeant Harry Lopez, who he met up with prior to ask about anything that might have occurred at the theatre. Lopez picked him up, said, "I'm taking you somewhere." And once they were away from the neighbourhood, Lopez basically rounded on him and said, "Did you know that I would find out what I found out about the theatre? Are you trying to get me in shit?" McDaniel pled ignorance and innocence. And Lopez explained that, yeah, something had happened at the theatre several years ago, 3 years ago, in fact. A man was stabbed to death there in a cloakroom. And what's more, that man, unbeknownst to me, I didn't even realise he was dead, was our colonel when we were serving out in Afghanistan together. Now, he was only our colonel for half of our tenure. He was transferred to the CIA. This man, Benjamin Isaacs, dead. No one was ever convicted of the murder or charged with it. Very few details were released. So what does this mean? What this means is a mystery right now. We have no further information, but it's something for Simon to mull over. And after that, to thank Harry, and because this is what Harry had basically picked him up early in the morning for, he helped him out at the Veterans Hospital. Now, eventually our crew got together later on that day. Simon was very much ducking the possibility of meeting up with Nina for any kind of fun time, but that's all right, because the crew came together with a decision in mind. They were going to go and check out the store of this Grace Prendergast. They've got about time to do two things before the big show where Celestial Sphere have got to perform at the theatre again, and that may draw all kinds of occult nonsense with it. So they decided they were going to go and do two things. One, the first, is to check out Grace Prendergast's store. So two characters, namely Jean and Zayden, go in through the front door, where, for all intents and purposes, it looks like a down-on-its-luck charity shop in a run-down part of town that's largely been abandoned or gentrified. Suburbs have basically invaded part of town, and the parts that haven't been torn down and replaced with lovely houses with white picket fences are old brick buildings that have long been vacated, except wedged between two of them you've got this tiny Goodwill store. Your wishes can come true. Bits and Sundries is its name. Frosted glass on the door, but you can see through the window. Lots of tatty old clothing, old Monopoly sets, tattered books, the usual thing that sits in a charity shop window for months, if not years, and never sells because pieces are missing if it's a board game and the last page has been torn out if it's a book. A man heads out. There was a shopper in there, a fellow in a suit. He leaves, and Jean and Zayden enter, where they're greeted roughly by a rather miserable sales assistant who is flicking through a magazine. Says, "You touch it, you buy it." Goes back to his magazine. Jean asks the fellow whether they have anything in the charity shop of Antonio Bellegarde's. The sales assistant picks up some interest there. Yeah, we have his old boxing robe and his gloves from back when he was a big deal. We don't have it out on display. That's more of a curiosity piece, but here you go. And he ends up setting a pretty high price for both of them. Realizing that this assistant may not know the full details, but may at least be able to contact Grace, Jean asks for Grace to come and meet them, maybe to haggle the price a little. And so Grace Prendergast heads downstairs after being dialed on a rotary telephone by the sales assistant Jin. While this is going on, our other two characters here, Evelyn and Simon, decide they're going to enter the building from the rear. Now, there's no alleyway that runs alongside Bits and Sundries. Rather, it's a block with a road that enters a courtyard that is at the rear of all of the buildings in this cube. And this is overgrown. There's a rusted car there. There's barrels. And as they approach, they realise there's a giggling sound, multiple giggling sounds from around them, like they're being observed by someone who finds them all highly amusing. Simon succeeds a vital role here and realises that entering the curiosity shop from the rear, they can access a liminal space. It appears there's one that is wreathed around the store. But doing so, they would injure themselves unless they made a suitable sacrifice. Evelyn decided reluctantly to give up her Victory Day, her Victory Red lipstick that she wore last in 1945. And with it, Simon basically paints a rune on the film between realities to allow them to pass, getting rid of the lipstick in tow. But they realise they're still being followed as they enter the building from the rear. Grace appears downstairs, and sure enough, as the description implied, her face is like a crescent moon. She does look like a woman from a fairy story. Indeed, from the reverse of the store, Evelyn and Simon can see that it looks a little like the witch's house from Hansel and Gretel. It's all brightly coloured, not the run-down building that it looks like from the front, but maybe that's just how it appears through this liminal space. Grace admits to everything. Well, I say everything. Jean and Xaden interrogate her as much as they feel they can within the bounds of politeness. They say, "What do you know of Antonio Bellegarde? This coin that you gave him?" And she admits. "I offered him a deal," she says. "I visited him in hospital. I gave him back his health. I gave him back his strength. And yes, there was a cost. And yes, he paid that price. That is the nature of curses," she says. "But it isn't for you to enforce it. It's not for you to investigate me. So what of it?" And they're left thinking, well, yeah, what of it? What does it mean that they now have the coin? What does it mean in terms of Ixit Lil Shokatil and this potential demon's desire to devour the entire city? They're left thinking on that, and most curiously of all, Evelyn and Simon, who have entered the property from the rear, the shop they enter is not the same one that Xaden and Jean are currently inhabiting. Theirs appears to be a museum-like gallery, many ornate, very expensive pieces in cabinets. There's a lot of giggling taking place again, but Evelyn shuts that down rapidly with a dire command spell. I should note as well, Simon McDaniel used the portal to the outside ability that all outcasts have, bleeding the dice to bring Evelyn through with him. But, crucially, Evelyn saw something in one of these cabinets. It looked like a turquoise Aztec mosaic, like a mask, and she reached into the cabinet and put both hands on it, just as the giggling around her was about to pick up again. Well, that is where the session ended. So we have most definitely confronted the person behind Antonio Bellegarde's copy. I mean, she even said that the mannequins in the window, I can make them come to life like that and attack you if you do anything to me. She is a mistress of the homunculus, the simulacrum, and other such terms. But, all that said, where are they going to go with that information? And do Evelyn and Simon intend to steal this Aztec relic? Well, we will have to see. We will have to see. So that is the end of part 3 of the final bout. And if you want to play any of my games, you can head on over to patreon.com/MatthewDawkins, where there are lots of games that are currently on offer. All you need to go and do is back the Patreon, you join the Discord, and I will find a game that suits you. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.